In a bustling city, a law enforcement officer makes a choice that sends shockwaves through the streets, the media, and the entire nation. When he targets a black teenage girl during a tense public moment, he believes his actions will remain unchallenged. Yet the young woman holds a secret identity. She is the daughter of a prominent United States senator. What begins as a routine day quickly spirals into a whirlwind of drama and suspense. Brace yourselves for an unforgettable journey. Before diving into the story, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss the latest stories. If you're excited about this story, let us know. If you enjoyed the video, press 1. If not, press 0. Your feedback really inspires me to gather more uplifting and meaningful stories. The rising sun lit up downtown Philadelphia, casting long golden rays across the bustling sidewalks. Officer Gregory Jackson awoke that morning feeling uncharacteristically on edge. Sleep had been elusive the night before. He'd been haunted by anxiety over the upcoming departmental review. The Philadelphia Police Department was under increased public scrutiny after multiple incidents of excessive force had dominated headlines. Gregory, however, was confident he'd never face that kind of trouble. He prided himself on his by-the-book approach and believed deeply in the idea that he was ultimately protecting his community. Yet the tension in the air felt thick, and he couldn't brush aside the uneasy feeling that something big was coming. As Gregory geared up in his cramped locker room, the voices of fellow officers murmured around him. Rumors of a protest scheduled at City Hall spread like wildfire. Months earlier, the local activist group People for Justice had announced demonstrations against alleged police misconduct. Gregory zipped up his heavy Kevlar vest and glanced at his standard-issue Glock 19. The routine felt sobering today. On his drive from the station to his assigned area, he passed Independence Hall and glimpsed crowds already forming near the Liberty Bell. He remembered the commissioner's stern warning, "Keep order, keep the peace, whatever it took." Despite the tension, Gregory couldn't start his shift without his usual coffee. Pulling into the Starbucks parking lot on Walnut Street, he spotted a group of teenagers chatting animatedly outside. It was a diverse bunch carrying homemade signs that read, "End police brutality and justice for all." They laughed among themselves, exuding an air of youthful optimism. One girl with braids woven intricately around her head glanced at Gregory with mild curiosity. He felt something catch in his chest but brushed it off. After all, he was just another cop grabbing a latte. He had no idea she would soon upend his entire life. After collecting his coffee, Gregory cradled the warm paper cup in his hand. Outside, the group of teens was gone, likely heading toward the protest near City Hall. He sighed, setting aside any nagging concerns. Officers were trained to maintain control, and after 8 years on the force, he considered himself seasoned. Yet a certain electric energy was humming through the city. Even the air felt charged, as if the atmosphere itself crackled in anticipation of a storm. As Gregory climbed back into his patrol car, a Ford Explorer marked with the PPD emblem, he double-checked the dispatcher's instructions. There was an odd tightness in his stomach he couldn't shake. An hour later, Gregory found himself patrolling the perimeter of the protest, watching the crowd swell. Local news reporters from CNN and Fox 29 circled with cameras and microphones hoping for a story. Demonstrators raised their signs, chanting slogans. Everything seemed peaceful, but Gregory noted an undercurrent of unease. He recognized that in tense situations, a single spark could ignite chaos. He scanned the sea of faces and glimpsed that same teen with the intricately braided hair. This time she was front and center, chanting with the group. She looked younger than the rest, maybe 16 or 17, and carried a sign reading, "Liberty for all in Philadelphia." It momentarily struck him how someone so young could be so passionate. No sooner had Gregory identified the teenager than a verbal altercation erupted near the fountain at Dilworth Park. A man in a dark hoodie was yelling at another protester. Sensing potential violence, Gregory moved in to break up the dispute. Whistles blew and the crowd shifted. In the middle of the confusion, Gregory suddenly found the teenage girl standing right beside him, worried eyes locked on the two men who were inches from pushing and shoving. She tried calling out for calm, urging everyone to remember the peaceful nature of the protest. Distracted by the tension, Gregory hardly noticed her at first. He barked orders for everyone to step back. A moment later, a sudden shove from the scuffle catapulted the teen forward directly into Gregory. The collision was swift. Fueled by heightened adrenaline, Gregory believed he was under attack. Without pausing to assess, he swung his fist. The crack of knuckles against the teen's jaw seemed to reverberate through the square. She stumbled backward, eyes wide with disbelief, and collapsed onto the pavement. A hush fell over the crowd, replaced instantly by a cacophony of shouts. Cameras whirred into action, capturing the shocking moment. Gregory's own heartbeat thundered in his ears as he realized he'd just assaulted a minor, someone who had not in fact posed a direct threat. Instantly, pandemonium erupted. Protesters screamed, demanding that Gregory be held accountable. Onlookers rushed to the teen's side, trying to help her stand. Gregory reached for his radio, calling for backup, but his voice quivered in a way it never had before. Then he heard it. The chilling statement uttered by one of the protest organizers. "That's Senator Rivers' daughter." He just punched Senator Rivers' daughter. The words sliced through him. Senator Jerome Rivers was a known political powerhouse championing justice reform. He was well respected across party lines. Gregory's mind raced. He had just assaulted the child of a U.S. senator in full public view. Videos of the incident immediately spread across Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. The hashtags #JusticeForRivers and #PPD brutality soared to the top of social media trends within hours. International news outlets from BBC to Al Jazeera picked up the footage of a Philadelphia officer slugging a defenseless teenage girl. Public outrage grew like wildfire. Meanwhile, Gregory stood by in shock, mind spinning from the gravity of his mistake. Colleagues on site, eyes wide with horror, tried to control the scene. Paramedics arrived and whisked the teen, her name now revealed as Alana Rivers, away to Jefferson Hospital. Within the hour, Gregory was whisked back to the precinct. He found himself seated in a cold, sterile conference room facing the captain and two members of Internal Affairs. Captain Maria Garcia's expression was grim, her voice clipped and measured. She informed him that he was placed on immediate administrative leave pending an investigation. The Internal Affairs officers quietly took notes while Gregory recounted his version of events. Though he tried to justify his actions as self-defense, the investigators weren't swayed. After a tense silence, Garcia said only 3 words Senator Rivers called. News cameras swarmed outside the station as a sleek black SUV pulled up, flanked by local media vans. Senator Jerome Rivers stepped out wearing a dark suit and a thunderous expression. Known for his calm demeanor, he was decidedly furious, eyes flickering with a rage rarely witnessed by the public. Journalists hurled questions, but he ignored them. He marched straight into the precinct, demanding immediate answers. Gregory watched from behind a glass partition as the senator strode past, accompanied by half a dozen aides. The officer's insides twisted. Whatever illusions he'd held about a quiet resolution evaporated. While Senator Rivers met with the captain and police commissioner, word leaked that Alana was only 17 years old. She was a high school honor student, slated to attend Princeton University the following year, and a vocal activist for racial justice. Her mother, Dr. Celine Rivers, was a pediatric surgeon at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. The Rivers family, championed as a beacon of integrity and service, had garnered national respect. Gregory Jackson, once a poster child for model policing, was now swiftly becoming the face of everything wrong with the system. The entire police force braced for a public relations nightmare of colossal proportions. In a quiet corner of the precinct, Gregory's phone buzzed. It was his wife, Angela. She'd seen the video. Her voice cracked as she asked him what had happened and why. Her shock and disappointment washed over him. After reassuring her without fully knowing how to, Gregory ended the call. He then found messages from his sister, his father, his close friends. Everyone had witnessed his downfall in real time. In this era of viral media, there was no hiding from what he'd done. Waves of dread crashed over him. His entire existence teetered on the brink of collapse. Even as the city reeled from the footage, unexpected whispers began circulating around the police station. One of Gregory's fellow officers, Detective Brian Krause, quietly confided in him that rumors were swirling about potential sabotage. There had been intelligence chatter suggesting that certain extremist groups might be planning to spark violence at the protest. Krause insinuated that Gregory might have been intentionally shoved to create a scenario that would reflect badly on the department. Torn between guilt, fear, and a desperate need to cling to any explanation, Gregory latched onto the possibility that the entire fiasco was a setup. But who would do such a thing? Later that evening, Senator Rivers addressed the media outside Jefferson Hospital. Alana had suffered a fractured cheekbone and a mild concussion, but was in stable condition. The senator's measured tone carried a lethal edge as he demanded accountability and promised swift legal action. Inside the hospital, Alana lay in bed trying to process the day's events. A nurse quietly changed her bandages, glancing with pity at this young girl thrown into a national spotlight. Alana, for her part, felt numb. She had always admired her father's fight for justice, never imagining she'd become a central figure in that battle. Back at the precinct, Gregory faced a harsh barrage of questions from internal affairs. Videos had captured the punch from multiple angles, leaving little room for doubt. Even with the conspiracy theory floating around, there was no justification for Gregory's quick resort to violence. Lieutenant Rowan from IA had a stack of documents on the table, complaints from Gregory's past. Though minor, they revealed a pattern of escalating aggression during arrests. Gregory was stunned. He hadn't realized that multiple small incidents over the years had quietly compiled into a troubling record. The gravity of his predicament sank in even further. As the department prepared for a formal press conference, Gregory slipped into the evidence locker room trying to clear his head. He was startled to find himself face-to-face with Officer Marcus Crowley, a high-ranking member of the Fraternal Order of Police. Crowley's expression was unreadable. He offered Gregory a hushed solution: the union would back him, bury unsavory details, and spin the narrative of self-defense as long as Gregory cooperated. Appalled by the suggestion, Gregory asked what cooperation entailed. Crowley's tight-lipped grin spoke volumes. With an election year approaching, hush-hush deals were currency in a system driven by power. For the first time, Gregory questioned if he'd been naive all along. In another part of town, Detective Krause dug deeper into rumored infiltration by extremist groups. He stumbled upon an obscure online forum discussing ways to instigate chaos at the Philadelphia protest. The forum bragged about inciting police violence with threads referencing the name Jackson. Krause's mind raced. Had they known Gregory's name beforehand? Was he specifically targeted for a push that would cause him to lash out? But even if so, it didn't excuse Gregory's action. Krause also found suspicious posts linking large donations to a shadowy figure with ties to a political rival of Senator Rivers. The threads wove a tangled web hinting at a possible orchestrated effort to sabotage the senator's stance on policing. Yet the truth remained murky. The following morning, Philadelphia's major newspapers bore headlines like "Officer Assaults, Senator's Daughter, and Public Outcry" over PPD brutality. Talk radio stations buzzed with opinions. Cable news talk shows hosted debates featuring attorneys, activists, and former police officers. The story was unstoppable. Anonymous sources leaked details of Gregory's disciplinary record, fueling the fire. Meanwhile, a peaceful vigil formed outside City Hall. Crowds gathered nightly, lighting candles for Alana's recovery and demanding systemic change. Gregory holed up in his modest row house blinds, drawn paralyzed by shame. He found his name now synonymous with unprovoked violence, a far cry from the hero he'd once aspired to be. On the second night of Gregory's suspension, he received an unannounced visit. Two FBI agents, Agent Melissa Quinn and Agent Duncan Bowers, introduced themselves with stern courtesy. They explained that the federal government was considering civil rights charges against Gregory. Moreover, they were investigating a possible conspiracy aimed at discrediting Senator Rivers, who was championing a controversial police reform bill in Congress. The agents questioned Gregory about the events leading to the punch, whether he had connections to extremist factions, and if he'd been coached to escalate. Gregory, reeling from the enormity of it all, insisted he had no part in any conspiracy. Yet the seeds of suspicion were firmly planted. While Alana continued her recovery, Senator Rivers struggled with his own internal battles. His daughter had always been his greatest source of pride. Seeing her black eye and bandaged cheek unleashed a fury he couldn't contain. Political opponents attacked him for exploiting the situation to push his reform agenda. However, Rivers was torn between a father's rage and the knowledge that systemic change often required strategic calm. Late one night, he sat by Alana's hospital bed, hand-clasping hers. She insisted he not let bitterness destroy the progress they'd worked so hard to achieve. It was a poignant moment that reminded Rivers of the real reason behind every bill he championed. Meanwhile, Detective Krause found a piece of the puzzle that changed everything. For weeks, an undercover operation targeting a suspected white supremacist group called the Patriot Collective had been building a case. Krause discovered that a high-ranking member of that group was seen mingling with local officials opposed to Senator Rivers's reform bill. A covert payment from an untraceable source matched suspicious bank deposits in the name of Officer Marcus Crowley. Crowley was the same man who had offered Gregory a deal at the station. Krause realized that not only was Gregory a convenient scapegoat, but Crowley might have orchestrated the entire meltdown to sabotage Rivers's bill and tarnish the senator's influence. As public pressure mounted, the Philadelphia Police Department scheduled a major press conference at City Hall. Captain Garcia, Commissioner Daniels, and Senator Rivers were expected to speak. The building overflowed with reporters and community members. Protests continued outside, placards waving. Alana, determined to show resilience, made a surprising appearance, stepping onto the stage beside her father. She held her head high despite the bruises and bandages. The hush that fell over the crowd was palpable. Cameras flashed, capturing the senator's daughter, an emblem of strength and injustice. However, the tension was thick enough to taste. No one knew what was going to be revealed next. Gregory, though officially suspended, stood inconspicuously at the back of the press conference, shielded by a baseball cap and sunglasses. His heart pounded. He could barely reconcile how quickly he'd gone from a dutiful officer to a pariah. The shame was overwhelming, but he also felt a growing sense of anger. If the rumors of sabotage were true, then he'd been manipulated into a tragic blunder. But none of that absolved him from the fact that he'd thrown the punch. Sweat beaded on his brow as he waited for the press conference to begin, dreading what might be announced. After Senator Rivers delivered a fiery speech condemning police brutality and calling for reform, Captain Garcia took the podium. She expressed deep regret for Alana's suffering. Suddenly, mid-speech, Detective Krause walked up and discreetly handed her a folder. The captain paused, flipping through the documents. Silence filled the chamber. Then she dropped a bombshell. Preliminary investigations pointed to a conspiracy involving an extremist group, certain police union officials, and unidentified political operatives. In short, they had orchestrated the chaos, intending to provoke an incident that would undermine Senator Rivers's credibility. The hush from the press turned into frenzied murmurs. Sensing that the official statements wouldn't end there, the press corps waited with bated breath. Captain Garcia announced evidence linking Officer Marcus Crowley to off-the-record meetings with known agitators. Emails indicated direct communication about manufacturing a high-profile moment at the protest. Although the details were still emerging, Crowley had vanished, presumably to avoid immediate arrest. A wave of shock rippled through the crowd. Gregory, who'd been quietly listening, nearly collapsed from relief, horror, and disgust. Yes, a conspiracy was in play, but that conspiracy needed someone hot-headed enough to strike a minor at the slightest provocation. That someone had been Gregory. Moments after the press conference ended, pandemonium erupted. Reporters hurled questions, bystanders shouted in outrage, and uniformed officers sprang into action to locate Crowley. The entire building buzzed like a hornet's nest. Detective Krause spotted Gregory in the crowd. He beckoned him over, telling him they had intel suggesting Crowley was fleeing to New Jersey. Suddenly, Gregory felt compelled to help. He might have been suspended, but he still had a duty to rectify the wrong. Against departmental rules, he jumped into his personal car and raced toward the Walt Whitman Bridge, trying to intercept Crowley. Night fell as Gregory sped along I-76, weaving through traffic with a single-minded focus: find Marcus Crowley. Sirens wailed behind him, backup from the PPD or possibly state troopers. Up ahead, he spotted a black Ford Mustang matching Crowley's license plate number. Gregory's heart hammered. He pressed on the gas. Just before reaching the midpoint of the bridge, red and blue lights illuminated the sky. State troopers had blockaded the roadway. Crowley veered onto the shoulder tires, screeching. Gregory skidded to a stop, exiting his car. Crowley tried to flee on foot, but troopers tackled him. Out of breath, Gregory watched as Crowley was wrestled into handcuffs. In the midst of the swirling lights, Gregory locked eyes with Crowley. The disgraced union official spat curses at him, accusing Gregory of betraying the department. A tidal wave of conflicting emotions slammed into Gregory. He recognized that he had unwittingly become Crowley's pawn. By giving in to panic and aggression, Gregory had done precisely what Crowley needed him to do. Now kneeling on the concrete, Gregory could only whisper a remorseful apology, though not to Crowley but to himself and to Alana, who had borne the brunt of his mistake. State troopers hauled Crowley away. The adrenaline in Gregory's veins felt like venom. In the days that followed, details of the conspiracy emerged. Crowley had been receiving funds from a shadowy pack tied to one of Senator Rivers' primary opponents. Their plan was to orchestrate a scandal that would discredit Rivers' push for criminal justice reform. Although Gregory had been used, he was not blameless. Under normal circumstances, he would have faced immediate termination and criminal charges. However, internal and federal investigations revealed enough mitigating factors, chiefly that Gregory had been blindsided by a shove in the chaos. The district attorney pressed assault charges, but they were reduced from a felony to a misdemeanor due to the mitigating circumstances. Still, Gregory's career hung by a thread. As the wave of public outrage subsided, Senator Rivers held a private meeting with Gregory. The senator looked physically and emotionally drained, but a resolute strength underpinned his demeanor. Gregory offered an unreserved apology for his actions, tears brimming in his eyes. Instead of raging, Rivers quietly stated that Alana would recover, but the emotional scars would take time to heal. "My daughter wants to forgive," he said softly. "She believes that real change happens when we engage even with those who hurt us." Gregory was speechless. Rivers concluded by explaining that while he wouldn't block the legal proceedings, neither would he push for the maximum penalty. He wanted the justice system reformed or otherwise to do its job properly. A week later, Alana gave her first public interview. Wearing a bandage and sporting a fading bruise, she addressed the cameras with quiet dignity. She expressed hope that her ordeal would spark honest conversation about systemic biases and better training for officers. She refused to let bitterness consume her. At the end of the interview, a reporter asked if she blamed Gregory alone for what happened. Alana responded that the real blame lay in a culture that fails to value human life equally. In a simple statement, she said, "Change is the only acceptable outcome." Viewers across the nation were moved by her grace and maturity. In the subsequent months, Crowley and his co-conspirators were indicted on charges ranging from inciting violence to campaign finance violations. The lead conspirators faced significant prison sentences, and the entire scheme tarnished the reputations of those willing to orchestrate violence for political gain. Gregory's trial ended with him pleading guilty to a lesser assault charge. He was sentenced to probation and required to perform community service, specifically in youth mentorship programs focused on bridging the gap between law enforcement and young people of color. Additionally, he was dismissed from the Philadelphia Police Department. The reverberations were immediate and fitting. Those who had sought to manipulate the system faced severe penalties, and Gregory was forced to atone in a public and transformative way. Barred from working in law enforcement ever again, Gregory found a job at a local nonprofit that provided after-school programs for inner-city teenagers. It was humbling, but also strangely redemptive. He spent his days teaching conflict resolution skills, ironically helping teens learn to manage adrenaline and fear lessons he had failed to heed on that fateful day. Though many kids eyed him warily at first, a mutual respect grew. Gregory felt a measure of solace in using his past mistakes to guide others. In an unexpected twist, this new path brought him closer to truly serving the community than he ever had as an officer. As Alana regained her physical strength, she continued her activism. She helped organize a scholarship fund for students who showed promise in social justice advocacy. The senator's office offered discreet assistance, and Dr. Celine Rivers volunteered at free medical clinics in neighborhoods lacking healthcare resources. Whenever Alana caught her reflection in a mirror and saw the faint mark on her cheek, she refused to see it as a symbol of victimhood. Instead, it was a reminder of resilience, a testament to her determination to forge a just world. And quietly she recognized that from the chaos a kind of light had emerged. Senator Rivers pressed forward with his reform bill, rallying bipartisan support. The shocking incident involving his daughter had brought national attention to the deep flaws in policing and the urgent need for robust accountability measures. Meanwhile, the Philadelphia community sought healing. Some residents continued to distrust the police, but the exposure of corruption and the senator's open dialogue with city officials began to thaw long-held tensions. Town halls became more common, inviting input from ordinary citizens. It was not an immediate fix, but it planted the seeds of real change. Several months after the incident, Gregory encountered Alana by coincidence at a community event. Awkwardness hung in the air. He managed a halting hello, and she nodded in acknowledgement. There were no dramatic overtures of forgiveness, no cinematic declarations. But in that shared moment of eye contact, Gregory felt her unwavering resolve. She had survived his violence. She had stood up for her beliefs. And in doing so, she'd forced him to face his own failings. That silent exchange spoke volumes. Alana eventually turned away, continuing her conversation with local youth leaders, leaving Gregory feeling both humbled and grateful. As years passed, Philadelphia implemented new training protocols. Body cameras became mandatory. Officers were required to undergo racial bias training. The Civilian Oversight Board was strengthened, giving citizens a direct line to address misconduct. Slowly, the city's approach to law enforcement changed. The memory of Alana Rivers' assault remained a cautionary tale, an example of why complacency and prejudice had no place in policing. Gregory's name occasionally surfaced in discussions about accountability, serving as a reminder that even good officers could commit grievous errors under stress. Through her healing journey, Alana grew into a formidable advocate. She lobbied for educational reforms, focusing on underserved communities. Many credited her with galvanizing a generational movement that demanded respect from law enforcement. She became a mentor to countless young women, emphasizing that one's voice could be a powerful instrument of change. In time, she wrote a memoir recounting her experience. Her father continued his political career, championing reforms that many once believed impossible. Though the path was strewn with obstacles, Alana's story and the tragedy that sparked it served as a beacon of hope. In the end, all the conspirators who orchestrated the violent setup met their match in the courts. Justice was served, though it could never undo the harm inflicted. Gregory's life was forever altered. Karmic retribution had arrived in multiple forms. Public disgrace, a criminal record, and the stark reality of knowing he had harmed a teenage girl who meant no harm to him. Yet from the ashes, Gregory found a redemptive calling. And for Alana, no single punch would define her future. Instead, she stood as living proof that adversity could birth movements capable of reshaping an entire nation. Thank you for joining us on this roller coaster of revelations, betrayal, and redemption. We hope this gripping story inspires conversations about justice, accountability, and the resilience of the human spirit. If it moved you, don't forget to show your support by hitting that like button and sharing this video with friends, family, and anyone invested in true reform. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories that dive into the heart of critical issues and unforgettable moments. Your engagement empowers us to continue shedding light on tales that truly matter.